Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new, welcome. We're going to get back into more Emily Reed drama. So we're going to be jumping into Beck Reacts to Mr. Snowflake's Questions Part 2, and what we're going to be doing is probably splitting it up since it is 40 minutes long. That way we can have two separate videos that are probably decently long, but at the same time, much better than probably like an hour and a half. That being said, we're just going to get straight into it and see what Beck is going to be answering today.
Did Amber ever show what you think was genuine fear or concern when it came to her health and lack of mobility, or does she just not care if she dies before 50? And did anything genuinely change after the cancer in terms of attitude or trying to get better, even if just temporarily? Good question.
She would sometimes cry and get upset about her weight. When I'd speak to her about it, what hurt her the most was always that she felt she would never be her goal weight and that she would never look the way she wanted to look. Weight loss is hard, I know it is, but it's been so many years since she started her channel that she could have reached that goal in a healthy way, including any slip-ups along the way by now, if she had really wanted to. I think what upset her most was not looking how she wanted to. Health was not the priority at all. Her career on YouTube was much more important than her health, and she said as much multiple times. If she were to lose weight or not be a train wreck, she wouldn't have as many viewers, and that was the most important thing to her, more than any concern for herself, those around her, or anything else. Nothing changed after her diagnosis.
Honestly, there are multiple different reasons why Amber wouldn't want to lose weight, but the major one is that she would have to face reality in which that she is a terrible person and people don't dislike her because she's overweight, but because of who she is as a person. Like, she always brings up that, oh, if I was skinny or if I was conventionally attractive, people wouldn't hate me as much as they do, someone who is thin or someone who is hot, which, yes, pretty privilege is a thing, but at the same time, you can't just say, well, it's purely based on the fact that I am overweight. Like, no, there are plenty of people who are overweight who are essentially loved because they are good people. And that's just one of the reasons. Like, another one, she said she doesn't like the idea of loose skin because, being 500 pounds in comparison to loose skin, which is something you can get removed, is somehow bad. Like, you should see it more as a trophy, like something that you earned rather than, all the extra layers of fat that you have that could potentially unalive you. Then there's also, the aspect of, like, Amber is a train wreck. Her weight is part of who she is. Like, she sees it as not just like a physical trait, but as a personality type. Being morbidly obese is part of her personality.
Did you notice that Amberlynn tends to chameleon herself to be just like the people around her, especially her partners, whether it being towards you or maybe when she was around Destiny/Dana, Jade, or her mom? One of the most fascinating things about Amber is her recording herself morphing into different Lyns. Did you notice that? I noticed it, and I don't notice anything.
I did notice that, and so did everyone around her. That was something that I'd brought up to her multiple times, and so did her friends. When we confronted her, she would say that she didn't realize that she was even doing it, and that it wasn't on purpose. I always thought it was her way of trying to fit in with the people around her. I don't think she has ever truly been confident in herself or in her own interests enough to just be herself around people. Or maybe she knew that who she really wasn't as likable as the people she wanted to befriend, so it was easier to act like them than to be judged or scrutinized for her own personality and behavior. I think it's important to find people who like you for who you are, but I think she didn't feel like that was possible, so she had to be someone else with everyone. If she had just been herself, she could have formed real friendships a long time ago and been actually working on herself and improving all this time.
Masking herself isn't a terrible thing. Like, it's not bad. A lot of people do it because they are neurodivergent. Like myself, for example, I am autistic and I will take on personality types or traits that other people have. Not because I want to, but because it's something I just do in order to socialize and relate with people. The same thing with a lot of other people, like anxiety, depression, just any of these issues. Or if you're just like very socially shy or introverted, where there are people who want to manipulate others, so they will try to bond with them by finding out what they like or how they act and try to have a similar personality type to them. Like, they try to manipulate them through, the emotional connection of relatability.
She always tries to change her personality, but she always comes across as a douche. Doesn't matter which personality she picks, it's douche, 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 douche.
That is something that a lot of narcissistic people fail to realize, is that even though when they take on people's personality traits or personality types, even if they're not fully conscious of it, they still have that very negative attitude, that very egotistical and just condescending attitude towards other people. So, and even though they may be mimicking someone else, they still have that very just brash attitude that people don't like.
So she needs to get better at that. Did Amber ever admit to lying about a disorder? There's so many examples of her lying about being diagnosed with stuff.
She never admitted to lying about a disorder, but I think that's because she genuinely believes that she has every single one that she says she has. She would self-diagnose constantly based on how she felt and a few Google searches. She was constantly worried about every symptom she had, so she would always come up with a diagnosis on her own for each one. It's a bad habit and not a good way to find out what's really going on with you. She would go to the ER so often, but rarely or never go to a primary care physician, OBGYN, psychologist, or therapist who could have been much more helpful. And as we know, when she would go see those doctors, it would just be a few times before she would never go again.
The reason why Amber doesn't want to go is because most therapists are going to hold you accountable for your actions. You can't just go, well, I have BPD, so therefore I can do whatever I want, or I'm justified in what I do, because they're not going to allow that. And most likely, if she gets diagnosed, it's not going to be BPD, it's going to be obviously NPD.
Amber has accused you of not allowing her to explore her bisexuality. Did she also prevent you from expressing your desire to be... See my little Jupiter's Delight smile? It's because it's coming up in a video. Wow. She seems very upset by the implication that she would date anyone that isn't expressly she, her.
While with Amber, she would be very defensive anytime I'd try to ask her if she may be bisexual. She would say no and accuse me of trying to label her or change who she was. I'd ask about it because she would talk a lot about being with guys, the incident at the movie theater, and about other things she did. It was okay to talk about, but it felt odd to me just how often it was brought up. I think back on it now, and I do think that she might have said those things so often to get some kind of reaction out of me. Maybe to see if I'd get jealous about it. I do understand being confused about your identity and wanting to explore that, but I was never really given that opportunity to support her or to allow her to explore that part of her. We didn't talk more about it because she was so adamant that she only liked women and would shut me down anytime I asked about possibly being bi. I think it did affect me in a way, especially after the breakup, and once she opened up more about it while with Jade. Jade was bisexual and poly, and Amber started to explore that more with Jade. At some point, and I've admitted this before, I think I let myself feel a little bit like if I were to be with a bi woman, she would eventually leave me for a man. That was an awful way of thinking and really pushed an awful stereotype as well as erasing the experience of bi individuals.
I want to quickly jump in and say, like, as a bisexual man, the fear that you have is reasonable because it can happen and has happened to Beck. And you know, having that fear doesn't make you a bad person. How you act upon it can potentially make you a bad person. Are you going to grow and become a better person, or are you going to place that fear onto your next partner and cause, you know, mental and emotional abuse to potentially occur? Like, it really comes down to you growing as a person and becoming better. Like, you're not bad for having those feelings because it did happen to you in the past.
I hate that I let myself have those thoughts, and I'm so sorry to anyone who may have noticed that I felt that way and were hurt by it. It was an awful way to view things. I've worked really hard to no longer have that type of bias anymore. I understand now that my experiences have nothing to do with bisexual women as a whole, and my experiences should never affect my expectations of others in the future. As for my experience as a non-binary person with Amber, I did bring it up a few times in our relationship. The only response I got was always, I don't know, you seem like a woman to me. It took me saying something publicly in a video recently to get her to respect my pronouns and name. So I don't think that if I'd come out at that time that she would have respected that decision.
Honestly, it really just comes down to the fact that Amber does it as a power move, like a way of holding something over Beck's head and just really being a massive twat about it.
What was the worst argument you and Amber got into? I'm sure it's all just molded into one horrible hue, but does anything stand out?
You're right. There was so much fighting that it has all melted together in my memory, and they were all really difficult. It's hard to pick out just one. I think the arguments that stand out the most for me are the ones where I got so overwhelmed that I had to leave the house and get away. One time, Amber, Eric, Ricky, and I were watching Adventure Time, and Eric changed the channel without asking. Amber, even though she did not like Adventure Time, and even though it was Eric's TV, had a huge blow up. I'd had enough, and I left without grabbing my wallet, my bra, or shoes. I drove an hour to my sister's and showed up at her doorstep barefoot and crying. I just wanted to escape.
Honestly, I can imagine how bad the situation could be for Beck, and like, I don't like Eric and Ricky, but I could also understand that too. And it's like, walking on eggshells 24/7 with someone like Amber, just like a 500-pound toddler, would be just the worst environment to be in. Scratch that. Not the worst environment, but one of the worst environments that I could potentially think of. Like, there is far worse, but pretty bad with Amber around.
What was the day of the We Have Broke Up live stream like? Great question. What was the pre-live stream, and more importantly, what was the post-live stream like? Good question. I don't think about these things. The live stream itself was so uncomfortable, with ALR just staring off into the distance and making Beck do all the talking and responding to the chat. What was the rest of the day like? Yeah.
The day of the We Broke Up live stream was really stressful. She spent the day asking me if I was sure about my decision, guilting me about how she wasn't sure what she would do without me, trying her hardest to make me feel awful. I wouldn't be there to take care of her anymore, and that's what she was most affected by. During that live stream and the following ones, it was obvious to me that she was trying to insult me and put me down to the audience. She really thought she was being clever. I knew I had to be there until I could get my things to move out, and with the promise of being paid monthly to help me get back on my feet, I tried to keep things amicable. I did try to clap back a few times though. For over a week, it was an emotional roller coaster, going from being completely fine to begging for me to come back, then emotionally manipulating me in an effort to get me to rethink my decision, and then being angry at me. Once Jade came into the picture, all manipulation toward getting me back ended, and there were no longer any moments of being nice to me. Everything became about rubbing this new relationship in my face and making sure I knew how quickly she had moved on, and making the split up as hard for me as it could possibly be. She treated Jade much better than she'd ever treated me, and she made sure that I saw that.
I can be empathetic with Beck because I, to a degree, can understand what they're going through, in the sense that I have been in a similar situation. Like, the toxicity of the relationship was nowhere near as bad, but the end result kind of was there. And I can definitely understand when Beck says that, you know, they treat their new partner so much better than they treated you, and they would deliberately go out of their way in order to make sure that you saw that. And it's like, why are you using your new partner as a pawn to get back at you? And also, why is your new partner allowing you to use them as a pawn to get back at me? Like, it makes no sense to me why people are okay with doing that. And Wifey had to some degree, see how Amber was treating Beck and then treating them. Like, there's no way in hell that they did not see that.
I like this one. Thank you so much, Beck, for speaking out against narcissistic abusers. It helped me recognise a lot of similarities in the way one of my family members treats the rest of us. Families, man. Oh, don't get me started. And enabled me to start doing my own research on how to handle the situation. I have a question based on my own experience with that family member. Did Amber ever ridicule you or generally make you feel bad for the things you enjoy, like drawing, video games, or watching certain shows? If so, do you think she did that to make herself feel better, or as a way of exerting control over you?
I'm so happy that I can help empower others to speak up on similar experiences. I also really like to hear that it's helpful in recognizing this kind of behavior in others' lives. I appreciate everyone who tells their stories and who just supports or watches in general. Thank you, Zalaris4144. So, she did make mean remarks about the way I dressed and the way I decorated. Otherwise, she didn't actively put down my interest, often outside of random comments here and there. I think that's because she just showed no interest in anything I liked, was doing, or enjoyed. We were always doing separate things in the same room together.
Yeah, no, 100%. I have had this thrown in my face more times than I care to count, from friends, from family members, to even my exes. And a lot of the times it's a way of trying to make you feel bad for enjoying things that may potentially be geared towards children, which a lot of the stuff that I like, movies, comic books, anime, cartoons, manga, video games, a lot of it is 18 plus. Like, children can't watch it or see it or play with it because it's not meant for children, even if some of that stuff in that genre is okay for children to watch. And it's like, try to make you feel bad for enjoying something and try to put you down to make you feel less about yourself and exert some sort of control over you. And the most annoying thing is that those same people will then go on to date other people who enjoy those things and won't say anything about it. It's simply just a shit on you because they don't really like you at the end of the day. They don't like who you are as a person. And they just want to exhibit some kind of control over you because they can do it.
Amber's probably watching this. Douche.
Trust me, I'm going to show you there are plenty of other words I would like to say that are so much worse.
Was Amber ever truly concerned about her health, like hygiene, mobility, etc.? Or was it all just an act? Wishing the best for you, Beck.
Amber did say that she was concerned for her mobility and that she wanted to be more mobile, but never did anything about it while with me. I think that was because her online presence was more important than improving her quality of life, just like with her health. She wasn't concerned about how that lack of mobility affected me either, and how much work and effort I had to put in to help her due to those things deteriorating. As for her hygiene, she really never brought up concern about it. She would douse herself in perfume sometimes to help any issues, but that's all. I won't go into detail about smells or anything too personal, but her hygiene did affect everyone around her, myself, and others' personal belongings, and she did not show concern for any of those things.
Oh, Beck hit the nail on the head. Like, the quality of life doesn't matter as long as they can fake the perception of the quality of life. And with Beck, it was always going to affect them, but also affected their friends and family too because of how Amber was acting. And it's the same thing with both Foodie and Amber. They say they want to do stuff, but just because you say it doesn't mean you actually mean it.
What do you think it will take for Amber to change?
Nothing is going to make Amber and Foodie change because they don't want to change. They don't want to put in the effort to change. If they had the ability to flick a light switch, yeah, sure, they'd probably do that. Most people would. But they're not willing to put in the effort to do so.
Ignore that question. Was Amber aware of feeder content, and do you know if she purposely made content for the feeder community? We love you, Beck. Now it's pretty clear she's making feeder content, but back then, did it ever come up?
Personally, I think being deplatformed would be the only way. I'm not saying I want that to happen. No matter how terrible she's treated me and the number of things she's taken from me, I would never wish the loss of a job, stability, or housing on anyone. I know how devastating that is for anyone. YouTube is how she makes a living. It's how she supports herself, and she uses losing her channel and views as an excuse not to change. The only way she would ever change is if it were her only option, so I don't see that ever happening. To answer the second question, Amber never admitted to me that she catered to feeders when deciding on her content or thumbnails. She did tell me that she would do mukbangs because they got views, and would use thumbnails showing herself eating for the same reason. Knowing how often she read through her comments and looked at anything online related to her, I can't imagine that she wasn't aware of what she was doing. It definitely felt like feeder content, but whether she made anything outside of YouTube for that purpose, or talked to anyone about feederism specifically, she never mentioned.
Honestly, I would say to a degree, like most mukbangs, like any mukbang in which you're eating copious amounts of food, especially copious amounts of unhealthy food, would be feeder content. And there might not be sexual undertones to the content itself, but you could see why certain people would enjoy watching that.
Does Beck know anything about Amber's falling out with Crystal? Actually, that is a good question. Yeah, tried being mates like she does with all her exes, and then it stops.
From what I witnessed, Amber very frequently reached out to Crystal. When Crystal got into a relationship with Nina, Amber was not a fan of having to share Crystal's time and attention with someone else, even though she was the one to introduce them to each other. Amber talked bad about Nina a lot to Crystal in an attempt to split them up. When I told her to leave them alone, Amber made it seem like she was just parroting things I'd told her about my own experience with Nina, and doing it to defend Crystal and to defend me and what happened in my relationship with Nina. I didn't want those things to come between them. What happened with Nina and I was unrelated, and I won't talk more about that experience because it doesn't compare to how Amber treated me at all. Eventually, Crystal got fed up and cut Amber off, understandably.
I had no idea this was even going on. Like, I did not know this was even part of the Amberverse, so I am surprised to hear this. And good on Crystal for telling Amber to take a hike.
Hi Beck, when you both lived together, did she ever sit outside? How come she never goes outside, even to just sit out there? Did you get bored with being inside with her a lot of the time? I remember watching a clip from that era, in one video, well, only one video, where Amber's like, oh, it's nice to just sit outside. I think that was her at her heaviest. So yeah, did she ever go outside? Did you get sick of being inside all the time?
She would sometimes sit outside on the front steps, but not often at all. She usually just stayed in the bedroom and on the bed. I did get really tired of those four walls, and it really contributed to my depression. I think the reason she didn't go out more often was likely due to mobility, but also just her being content with her laptop, phone, and everything else being taken care of for her.
Honestly, most single mothers will tell you the same thing. Like, they need interactions outside the home, and they also need friends or family members to be able to spend time with, because spending all day at home with a child, it is draining. Now, just to play the same logic to Amber, and we're good. Like, Amber is basically a toddler, so it's completely understandable why you get sick of her after a while, because she doesn't provide anything of value to a relationship mentally or emotionally.
Did you believe Amber's huge list of mental disorders she said she was diagnosed with? Before she met you, she said she was diagnosed with ASMR. Before she started YouTube, she did a post saying, I've been diagnosed with ASMR. So she lies about that stuff. Did you believe everything?
No, I knew that everything she'd mentioned being diagnosed with were all self-diagnosed. There was never any confirmation that I knew of for anything she'd mentioned having aside from cancer.
I mean, honestly, there's not really anything to add to that other than the fact that self-diagnosing is not valid, and if anyone is willing to do it without going to a therapist, psychiatrist, or a doctor, like, just don't trust them as a person, because there's a reason why they want that label.
What are your thoughts on Amber stealing Casey? Oh, okay, there you go, Casey. Stealing Casey's coming out story. Did Amber tell you anything similar while with you? Cheers, Beck. In case you don't know, Casey told YouTube their coming out story. Amber had the exact same, word for word, the exact same coming out story. So bizarre. How bizarre.
I know that I asked Amber about her coming out story, but I think she kept it vague. She said that she always knew she liked women and that her dad didn't take it well. I had to go back and watch the Ankles video on Amber's coming out story to see what story she told YouTube. I don't remember her telling me anything about a note or anything else in that video. But no, I'm really never surprised to hear about Amber lying about anything.
I am willing to believe Casey over Amber any day, because Casey doesn't have a history of lying, unlike Amber. And the thing is, Mummalyn did confirm, and I say confirm in quotations because I don't believe Mummalyn remembers what happened. I think they were on so many drugs back then, they just don't remember the situation overall. And she did say that she has a very poor memory because of all the drugs, so Amber probably just reminded her, again in quotations, of what happened, and Mummalyn was like, oh yeah, I remember that, drawing a complete blank.
Oh gosh, I'm late, and there are already so many questions, but here's mine. You made the cut, well done. You recently said that Amber used to be so mean to her mom, that she would make her cry. Did Amber ever make you cry in front of her? And what was Amber's response to seeing you and or her mother crying?
Amber made me cry many, many times in front of her. For someone who claims to be an empath, she really seemed to enjoy making people angry or pushing someone to their emotional limit based on how often she would do that to me and anyone else around her.
I'm just going to jump in here because I don't think I've ever seen a single person who claims to be an empath actually be one. Like, I've seen people who are narcissists, who are martyrs, or someone who's like an attention seeker that wants to just take attention away from the person who is actually hurting and put it onto themselves. Like, not a single person.
Amber's reaction was always to not acknowledge that the emotional response was due to her actions. We were always made to feel like we were exaggerating or that whatever was done to us wasn't a big deal. We just shouldn't be upset with her. She would say that she didn't understand why we were upset. She could never understand why her actions and the things she said could hurt or upset others. I do think she understood, but she just did not care at all. If someone upset Amber, though, it was everyone's problem, and there was no such thing as an overreaction.
You know, that sounds about right for a narcissist. Like, no matter what they do, they will always be justified. Like, if they can be perceived as misunderstood, well, they're misunderstood. If their actions are straightforward, well, it's probably just a reaction to your action for whatever you did wrong. And if you didn't do anything, well, maybe they were just acting like this because you were giving off a certain type of presence, or you were giving off a certain type of energy, and that's how that made them feel. Or maybe they were having some sort of, emotional crises, and that's what caused them to have the emotional outburst. Or maybe you're just taking it the wrong way and you just need to deal with it because that's how you feel, not how the situation actually went. Like, it's always a justification. But if you do something wrong, no, you have to always apologize for that, regardless of whether it was 1 year ago, 2 years ago, or 50 years ago. You still hurt them, and that will always stay with them. And if they are to react to you, well, you just have to take it because it's a reaction to your action. You would never have got that reaction if you did not do that thing in the first place.
How much time in a day would you get to spend by yourself? Like, how often did she expect you to hang in the same room as her? Versus how often you could have some alone time in another room. Did she control most of your schedule?
I would spend all my time in the same room with her outside of bathroom breaks, and any time I would leave to get food or see my family. There were a lot of times where she would keep me from seeing them all together, but a lot of those times I would go anyway and just decided to deal with the consequences when I got home. Whether I was leaving with or without her permission, there would be a time limit, and while I was gone, I would receive text messages to guilt me saying things like, "I wish I wasn't home by myself." During the bad times, where I was heavily medicated and depressed, she did spend a lot of time in the dining room where she would do puzzles while I slept. She did control the schedule, though I would sleep when I wanted to, except for all the times she would wake me up in the middle of the night to take care of something for her. When she wanted to fix the sleeping schedule, she would have us stay awake for 24 hours, then crash at 9 p.m. the next day. Then she would stay up late again the next night, or a few nights later anyway, making that entire day of exhaustion for nothing.
That in itself is also a form of abuse, like sleep deprivation. Dude, that is so messed up.
Whenever Amber would say she didn't like a meal or was done eating and showed a plate of food with some food left, would she eat it when the camera was off? She does that now.
I don't remember her ever throwing anything half-eaten away. If we were at a restaurant, she always finished her meal. If she said that she didn't like something, she'd usually eat it anyway, then order something else later.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Like, I don't really like this, but I'm gonna eat it, but I'm gonna order something else because I wasn't satisfied. That's a great way of trying to double up on meals.
In the initial days post-breakup, did Amber try and make you get back together? Didn't think about that one. Or did she ever manipulate you to try and make you feel like you should get back together? Also, when you announced the breakup on stream, did she ever guilt you about it off-screen? Or put it off for long periods of time?
The breakup live stream happened just a day or so after the breakup. I think she spent about 24 hours guilting me offline and trying to change my mind, then couldn't wait to go live and publicly make me feel guilty for my decision once it became clear to her that the guilt trip wasn't working. Even while Amber was dating Jade, she was still saying things to me like, "You should feel like crap for dumping me like that," or "I can't believe you dumped me like you did."
My honest opinion about Amber and how she perceives herself to be is almost perfect. Like, Amber is the closest thing in her mind to perfection. And it sounds so stupid, but Amber constantly brings up the line of not being perfect. But she will never say that she perceives herself to be the closest thing to perfection. And any slight criticism that she gets, it's, well, I'm not perfect. But she doesn't add on the last part, which is, but I'm close to it. And the reason she can say that is because she thinks that being fat is a character flaw. That it's not a physical trait, but an actual character flaw, the only one that she potentially has. And if you compare that with the mindset of her not really liking Beck or believing Beck is equal to her, it really becomes obvious that Amber is never going to treat Beck in a respectful manner when the breakup occurred because, like, how dare you break up with me? Like, do you have any idea how good of a catch I am in comparison to you? And, like, that's not me shitting on Beck, that's just Amber's mindset.
You are terrible, trying to get out of an abusive relationship. What were you thinking, Beck? What were you thinking? Taking accountability. Was your family sad about the breakup like Amber claimed, or were they relieved? Well, I'm assuming after the intervention, they were relieved.
My family was so happy. They were only upset that it didn't happen sooner. So yeah, I think they really all felt relieved afterwards.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone knew that was a given. That being said, this is actually a pretty good place to stop. We're about half an hour in, and we still have another 28 minutes to go. So Pretty good place to stop, and we may have a little bit longer one, not tomorrow, maybe the day after, in between a Amber video and another Amber video. So I'll probably stop here and call it a day. Thank you for watching, I hope you guys enjoy, and hopefully get to see lovely people in the next one. Bye bye.